I had never heard this song before and I had no idea what it meant. I tried to ignore it and kept searching for jobs. A few minutes later, the song quit playing. Nothing else happened until I tried to go to sleep that night. As soon as I got into bed, the song started again. Sister, sister, he's just a plaything. We wanna make him stay up all night? As it turned out, they weren't kidding. I got literally 0 minutes of sleep that night. Every time I started to drift off, I was woken up violently, then the song would play. When the sun came up, I gave up on trying to sleep and got out of bed. I was relieved at first because the song had quit playing. I thought the torture was over until a voice entered my mind. The voice said, "You're going to be uncomfortable, all you have to do is breathe." I sat there wondering what this meant until the voice spoke again. It told me I was going to sacrifice like Jesus and get beheaded. This threw me into a complete panic. My heart began racing and I started to have a mental breakdown. A few minutes later, some man knocked on my door. I answered and he gave me a pamphlet talking about the sacrifice of Jesus. My mind started racing out of control and I became completely delirious. I thought for sure I was going to die. My thoughts shifted to my family, and all I could think about was seeing them again. They were in Albuquerque at the time, so I decided to buy a one-way ticket there. When I reached the Spokane airport, my panic subsided. Everything was fine until I got on the plane to Albuquerque. I sat next to this huge man who kept telling me, telepathically, that he was going to crash the plane. Every time after he spoke he would sniff emphatically. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there trying to stay as calm as possible. The man became angry about this and started touching my leg. The second he touched me, I could feel him inside my mind. This caused me to panic until I was on the verge of causing a scene. Before I did anything, he told me to calm down and said, "You did a great job. You passed. Go enjoy your family. We have a job waiting for you when you get back." I thanked him and felt relieved. But I had no intention of contacting him at all. My only thought was to get as far away from him as possible. After getting off the plane, I headed to the baggage claim. A huge group of them surrounded me there. I watched them cautiously, then they all began sniffing at me. The sniff is something they do all the time. I think it has something to do with dominance. When I finally got my bag, I left the airport as fast as I could. My parents were right outside waiting to pick me up. I was so happy to see them again. I gave them big hugs and told them how much I loved them. This was my last happy moment in Albuquerque, however. They followed us everywhere we went after that. Whenever I saw one, they would sniff at me to let me know it was them. They would also smile, laugh, and stick their tongues out. As time went on, they started coaxing me to go outside alone. I was scared to death they would kill me, so I refused. Eventually, they threatened to harm my family, which caused me to give in to them. I told them I would do whatever they want if they left my family alone. They responded by saying go to church. I knew they meant the altar, so I agreed to go when I got back. When I went to the altar for the first time, the people acted very strange. It was unhuman. As I walked into the sermon room, everyone stared at me and began sniffing emphatically. Needless to say, I was scared as hell, but I took a seat. When the service began, a man came and sat down next to me. After he sat down, I began smelling something. It was a smell I had never smelled before. The only thing I can compare it to is a reptile and vinegar. After smelling it, I became very uncomfortable. I tried to remain calm and just sat there quietly until the service was over. When the service ended, they said, "You can leave now." After that, I knew I wasn't dealing with the government anymore. I realized that whoever I was dealing with was extraterrestrial, so I became very scared. I received no further instructions from them after that, so I began applying for jobs again. Even though I had done exactly as I was told, they still followed me everywhere I went. As time went on, they started harassing me day and night. I began to hear voices more often and I began to hallucinate things that I knew weren't real. They also started playing with me sexually. Both the males and the females would play out their sexual fantasies in my mind. This came with random and uncontrollable as well as extreme stimulation. See Brain Behavior Martian Tech. The harassment continued for weeks and intensified as time went on. I did my absolute best to maintain my sanity and tried to avoid them. This worked for a while, but eventually I had a huge meltdown. One day, I was in the bakery at Safeway when I got surrounded by a bunch of old men. Some of them looked at me and sniffed, so I knew it was them. They started stimulating my mind and simultaneously, then they spoke aggressively. They said, "Humans are nothing more than the result of a successful genetic experiment. You are a threat to the way these people think and you can no longer be free in society. Your life is over, you are nothing but a toy. Your purpose now is to suck." They continued to say other explicit things that were so obscene I won't repeat them here. Before they finished talking, I became enraged. It took every ounce of willpower I had not to kill them. I left the store and tried to calm down, but it only got worse. The rest of the night they continually stimulated and I couldn't stop. It got to the point where I was in serious pain. They finally stopped after I broke down and became completely distraught. I knew I couldn't take any more, so I attempted suicide. One filled a charcoal grill with lit coals, put it in my car and rolled up the windows. I reclined my seat, laid there calmly, then fell asleep. I should have died, but they woke me up in an extreme panic, which caused me to get out of the car. As I slowly regained consciousness, I felt very upset to still be alive. One had no clue where to go at that point, so I decided to check myself into the VA. They shipped me straight to the mental ward and was admitted. Nothing improved while I was there. The medication they gave me did absolutely nothing. I just sat there surrounded by a bunch of people and became exasperated. I knew their goal was to ruin my life by making me into a crazy person. I became determined not to let that happen and I started fighting back. After leaving the VA, everything I tried to do with my life was sabotaged. They didn't want me dead, but they also weren't going to let me live. In desperation, I went back to the altar to ask them what they wanted from me. I didn't know what else to. Before I tell you their reply, I need to make an important caveat here. I had endured so much abuse by this time that I was numb to them. The details of what they've done to me aren't essential to the story, so I won't include them here. If you want to know more about what I've been through, or more about them, write me. Just realize I've been tortured more than a pal. Their response was, "We want you as our sex slave." Thinking they were serious, I sat there waiting for them to do something. All they did was say, "Keep coming to church?" So I did. After a few more services, I found myself talking to Tim Remington face to face. He was telling me that I should consider becoming a minister. We were in mid-conversation when he suddenly revealed himself to me. I have no clue how he did it, but it looked as if his human face became his real face. It happened for only 1 to 2 seconds, but I was able to draw a sketch of what I saw. His eyes really stood out, so they captured my attention. They were huge and bulging. The eyelids were darker green, and the irises were yellow/brown with slit pupils. After witnessing this, nothing else happened. I continued attending the altar for a few more services, waiting for them to do something. They did nothing except for tell me to submit and surrender. I had no clue what they meant, so I left the church and never went back. After leaving the altar, they gave me some breathing room. They held back on their harassment and I began to recover. I decided to make one final attempt at a normal life by pursuing a career as a pharmacist. I started taking classes at NIC to finish up the prereqs I needed. I also started volunteering at a local pharmacy. Unfortunately, they followed me to school. There were several of them in every class I took. They made it impossible for me to study, and they continually harassed me. Especially while I took tests. Even with all of this going on, I still somehow managed to get an in during the fall semester. Sadly, my success was short-lived. The pressure this semester spring 2016, is far too intense. Every time I go to class, they start manipulating my brain until I go into a blind rage. Sometimes they suppress my brain until I begin to black out. They also manipulate my heart rate and flood my body with adrenaline over and over again, making me extremely uncomfortable. The females stimulate when they are close, and the males stimulate. It's incredibly exhausting. I struggled to pass my tests, so they couldn't blame this on me failing out of school. I want to continue, but I simply cannot. Every moment I spend in the classroom is absolute torture. The classes themselves are extremely difficult without all this added pressure. The worst part is I received an interview for LSU's pharmacy program. See personal documents. Since I cannot continue with the classes, there is no reason to go to the interview. My chance at a normal life has been ruined. They've also been depriving me of sleep, so I don't have the strength to continue. I was too smart for my own good, so they decided to remove me from society. They were worried I might change the way other people think, which could lead to problems. Problems in the form of scientific revolutions. We get much smarter as a species, we are going to become a threat to their existence. If you talk to me in person, you will see that I'm not crazy at all. The Martians are just so good at hiding in plain sight that no one would know they exist unless they revealed themselves. They are able to fool us so well that what I'm saying sounds impossible. However, they are 100% real. Realize their technology is millions of years more advanced than ours. Think about that for a second. Think about the advancement we have made in the last 100 years. Once you've done that, try to imagine what millions of years of technology would look like. The president is well aware of them, which is why I wrote him a personal letter. I hope he does something about it. I have done nothing wrong to deserve what's happened to me. I tried literally everything to find a job, and they sabotaged me at every corner. Initially, I thought the right thing to do was kill myself. After attempting suicide twice, it became clear they weren't going to let me die easy. My last resort was to take actions to bring this to the public's attention. I hope something good comes of it. Just realize that I'm a good person, and I'm completely innocent. Also realize that the people I killed are not what you think. Read Martian Technology to understand. To make it very clear, Tim 8, John were not wild human beings. Wild humans, normal people like you and I. Tim and John minds were controlled from birth by Martians. It's hard to imagine, I know. Nonetheless, it's all true. Why would I give up a career as a pharmacist to do this? I left out many details from my story. I wanted to write only the most critical events in order to make it coherent. If you want to know more, like how I discovered there are multiple species of them, feel free to write me. Why would aliens hide in a church? Same reason terrorists hide in mosques. If you're doing very bad things and you want to avoid getting caught, you will put up a front to make yourself look like a good person. How do you know about their technology? I have seen them use it, and they have talked to me about it. This was how I learned about their breeding stock of remote control humans. Physically, their humans are no different than us, they just lack a mind of their own. Why would they tell you so much? They value me because I'm smart. They were also very confident they could take control of my mind. Turns out they couldn't. Anyway, in the interim, some of us developed a personal relationship. They are very arrogant, so they told me much more than they should have. This allowed me to understand some of the things they can do. What else have you seen? I have seen them make things appear out of nowhere. One time I was sitting on a couch and a dollar bill appeared on my lap. Another time while driving, they made a paper bag appear in my passenger seat. They used random unsuspecting items so no one would think anything of it. I was alone both times this happened. I'm pretty sure they can pop in and out of this dimension based on other things I've seen. I'm also pretty sure they can overlap our reality with an alternate dimension. I say this because I have gone into stores where I know the employees and suddenly there are all new employees who I've never seen before. Some of the other things I've seen are so strange literally cannot describe them. This all makes sense though. Their technology is millions of years ahead of ours, so it should be incomprehensible to us. Why did they target you? They started following me after I encountered the being through meditation. Since my mind was so expanded from the experience, they deemed me a threat to the rest of society. They thought I would change the way people think, so they decided to remove me from society. I began to have profound thoughts about genetics while I was at graduate school, which is another factor. If certain ways of thinking are allowed to exist, revolutions will take place. They could not afford for us to have a revolution in genetics. If we did, we could eliminate diseases, cancers, and many other things that plague us. They need us to remain ignorant and continue struggling, otherwise we will become a threat to them. This will not make sense unless you are the president or one of his close friends. If this doesn't pertain to you, please ignore it. Mr. President. I want to thank you for your sacrifice to this country. It's very upsetting to hear you talk about the things they do to you. Why do you let them? I suppose you have no other choice. I've been struggling with them myself for over a year now. I had nothing to lose, so I chose this instead. I could never tolerate that much abuse. I hope you don't take any of their threats too seriously. Everything is a game to them. Realize they consider the entire human race a plaything, including you. They brag to me about what they do to you. I'm sure you already know, but he doesn't love you. Their brains don't even work that way. I don't know you personally, but they've shown me a lot about you. You're an amazing person. I hope you stop letting them humiliate you. Why be afraid to retaliate? Kennedy wasn't. It's time someone took a stand to end this nonsense. Can you think of a better legacy than that? What's worse, having everyone know the reality of the situation, or watching some of our best and brightest become slaves? Wish you the very best with the remainder of your presidency. If you're still in there, stay strong. Martian brain behavior. I've observed their behavior for almost a year now. Consequently, I've been able to make several deductions about them. The first deduction is based on their primary characteristics, which include 1. They are hypersexual. 2. They are hyperaggressive. 3. They are fearful and paranoid. In the human brain, the amygdala is responsible for all of these characteristics. Therefore, Martians must have an analogous structure, and it must be greatly enlarged. The morphology of their brain is also markedly different than ours. I know this because we've seen what the amphibian humanoids look like. The males are extremely aggressive. In their society there is only one thing, and that is power. Whoever is the smartest, biggest, and strongest wins. One time, I was talking to a young male who kept trying to intimidate/scare me. He saw that I was still confident in myself and immediately became discouraged. He stopped what he was doing and said, "You think you're better than me, then hung his head and walked away. I told him that wasn't true, but he wouldn't listen. After this, every time I encountered one-off emails in public, they would attack me, mentally, until they destroyed my self-esteem. They did this because they are scared to death of my intelligence. The only way they have the confidence to talk with me is if I'm scared for my life or completely despondent. To the males, everything is black or white. There is no middle ground. They are power-hungry megalomaniacs obsessed with control. If they are not 100% in control of every situation, they panic. If something happens they aren't anticipating, they get very upset. They hate surprises. I know this because I was smart enough to trick them a few times. To recap, the males are: 1. Megalomaniacal. 2. Obsessed with sex. 3. Extremely aggressive. 4. Fearful and paranoid. 5. Power hungry. 6. Obsessed with control. Sound familiar? Who else do you know that has these characteristics? If you answered, God from the Bible, you are correct. Martians are responsible for the God myth. Martians may have created humans, as they claimed, but they are certainly not gods themselves. They are just another intelligent species that evolved on a neighboring planet. There is no God. There is no heaven. There is no hell. Earth is as close to heaven as we'll ever get, and we are letting the Martians ruin it. They are going to destroy Earth just like they destroyed Mars if we let them. Our survival rests in their hands for the time being.